Welcome, everyone. Tonight's special meeting is called to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Welcome back, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. Welcome. Secretary Torres, roll call, please.
It looks like all board members are present.
Very good. Colleagues, moving on now to the approval of tonight's agenda. Unless there are objections, tonight's agenda will be approved as printed. Okay, very good. Moving on now to public comment. Is there anyone here who would like to address the board this evening? Excellent. Thank you, and thank you again for being here. So, colleagues, we're now going to move on to our superintendent interviews this evening. We have two on our agenda. And we're going to welcome Mr. Todd Bidlack to the podium this evening for our first interview. And Mr. Jay Bennett is going to escort Mr. Bidlack into the room. And again, please be reminded there are opportunities for you to provide us some feedback via those forms over there, so please do, and we appreciate that. Hello, welcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm assuming
This is for you.
All right. Nice to meet you, John.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Robert. Thanks for having me here.
Thanks for being here.
Thank
Pleased to meet you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the greeting
Hello.
as I walked
Yes.
in.
So nice to meet you. Thank you.
Nice to meet you as well. Nice to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you.
as well.
Thank you.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Nice to meet you. I remembered to unmute, although I was looking forward to the signal if I did not.
All right, Mr. Bidlack, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. So we're going to ask you some questions, and we're going to pass the microphone as we do ask those questions. I'll introduce
Okay.
our question askers as my board colleagues as we go forward. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here. So as you know, we've had the opportunity to review your resume. And if you would, please, tell us what specifically interests you in the Waterford Superintendency and how your background and experiences make you a good fit to be our next superintendent.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the greetings and invitation. I want to let you know that I am extraordinarily excited for the opportunity to interview for superintendent of such an incredible school district. I also want to take a moment to thank my wife, who's here with me this evening. She happens to be an elementary principal in a neighboring district and incredibly supportive. Yesterday, she was an inflatable costume running a relay race, and today she's here supporting me. I applied to Waterford School District because of your tight-knit community and strong relationships among its members. I believe that education thrives in an environment where trust and collaboration are fundamental and investment in community is critical. I am drawn to the characteristics of your community: good, honest, dependable people who want the best for their children. A hardworking community who values and supports the necessary and vital services within their township. Listed in my resume, you'll see that I'm a very well-credentialed educational leader with an extensive background in education and executive leadership. My journey in education has included being a classroom teacher and a building principal of 2 elementary schools, a middle school, and a high school. And over the last 8 years, I've been the assistant superintendent of learning services in Bloomfield Hills. Over the years, I've also been a robotics coach, a football coach, and wrestling coach. And for the last couple decades, I've been shaping school culture, raising academic success, supporting students and staff, fostering collaboration, and building high-functioning and dynamic teams. I invest in people, I empower others, and I coach leadership. I take a lot of pride knowing several of the people I have worked with have gone on to be consultants, principals, central office staff, and superintendents. Every position I have held, I have prioritized and built models of teacher leadership. My experiences range from school districts with only 1,500 students to a district with over 15,000 students. And in communities where families face economic disadvantages that range from 13% all the way up to communities that range up to 43%. I hold a bachelor's from University of Michigan Flint, where I earned certifications in math and science, and was awarded the Maize and Blue Academic Distinguished Scholarship Award. My master's is from ENU, and my specialist from Oakland University, with both of those degrees in educational leadership. I'm proud of my reputation of being student-centered and for being known for my depth of knowledge and instructional practices. One of my strengths is first seeing the best in others, their potential, and tooling them to excel. What's not in my resume is our household includes 4 talented and amazing boys. They range from a 5th grader to a junior in college, each one so uniquely different. We also have a dog that's in education as well as a therapy dog, but the boys and the dog are not with us here this evening. We have one working on a bachelor's degree in business administration, one that wants to own a doggy daycare, one with the sights on getting into the Ross Business School at the University of Michigan, and one that would like to be a football star. While we are a very busy family and prefer to be active, we are also dedicated to making time for the right things. And I'm here because I care about kids, I care about their future, and I care about teachers and their working conditions. I believe that I have a proven track record of improving systems where students and staff thrive. So thank you again for having me here, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bidlack. I'm now going to turn the microphone over to Vice President Wagner.
Please share an example of a time you have led a sustained multi-year improvement initiative such as a strategic plan. Be specific regarding the situation, the task at hand, your specific role, and the outcome.
Thank you, Vice President Wagner. When I think about strategic planning and improvement plans, I think sometimes it's hard and difficult to separate those two and that they both serve a very different function. For me, strategic planning really is about what we aspire to, what we're going to move into or reimagine. And improvement is working within the systems that are in place and trying to tweak those to really truly maximize student outcomes or improve a current pathway to really be more responsive to student needs. A time that I can think of where both of those had to occur simultaneously is definitely with reworking our math tracks in Bloomfield Hills. Prior to my arrival, Bloomfield Hills had historically really struggled in math compared to what their demographics and predictable outcomes should be in their competitive set. It seemed like there was a long history of underperforming in that area. And we had to take a look at that through a multifaceted lens in order to really maximize how we were going to move the needle on those student outcomes. And both addressing that through a strategic plan as well as an improvement plan process. Strategically, we just had to look at how that programming was not necessarily aligned, and there was quite a bit of horizontal vertical alignment breakdown that had occurred, as well as an underinvestment in time allocation at the middle school. And being able to rework all of those things along with restoring paths for acceleration, we were able to put that back in place, where now some of those outcomes and being able to address these issues in the last 3 years, Bloomfield Hills has been back at the top of the county for the PSAT in the area of math, or second in the county in that area. And a lot of it had to do with reinvesting that time allocation at the middle school level. Also, what had occurred was the path to complete algebra by the end of 8th grade had been pinched off. It had become too narrow. And the problem that we see later on when kids are taking the SAT, that if you're not in pre-algebra or if you're not in pre-calculus or higher when you're taking the SAT, which a lot of juniors are not necessarily at that level yet, it doesn't mean they're far behind, but it does mean that they're going to see trigonometry on that SAT that they haven't been prepped for. So the more students that are completing algebra by the end of 8th grade, that means you'll have a higher subset of students that are in that pre-calculus and will perform better on that SAT. So if you pinch that off too much at the 8th grade level, then you're not really going to see those outcomes later on. And it means students that are in Algebra 2, when they're taking the SAT, they really should retake that the following year as a senior when they are in pre-algebra and they're being exposed to what's going to be on that SAT. So we really had to take a look at that over a multi-year process where we were really analyzing that from all angles in order to figure out what is occurring that we're really not producing the outcomes to position our students to compete in a very competitive way to make it to the school of their choice. And that was very important for us to take a look at that. And in the last few years, we've been able to undo all of that. We've been able to restore their status and position and their competitiveness around mathematics programming. Having a background in math myself, it was very exciting to watch this take place and to help lead and guide it. And making sure that we had a path for all of our students.
Thank you. We're going to turn it over to Treasurer Donahue.
As our superintendent, how would you work to ensure and enhance the sustainability and reputation of our district?
Well, I really appreciate this is the second question that you're asking. And I'm reading into it a little bit too, because I've had a chance to analyze your schools of choice movement, either coming into the district or out of the district, along with going through just everything that I could find on the website, looking through your strategic plans, your auditing, your financial audits. I even happened upon one of my favorites was I think it's called the State of Township Address. I thought that was incredibly valuable. It went through the entire all the strategic initiatives. I even got to hear, I think it was the homecoming king and queen from last year, Megan and Aiden, talk about their experience as students. And there's a lot of insight with all of those pieces. I even see that you're heavily investing in a preschool center and all of those pieces coming together to really enhance sustainability of the district. And to me, sustainability really means the health of the organization in the long term. Through a lens of finance, through academic outcomes, through the health of the facilities. And really everything that I was pouring through really indicates that Waterford is standing in a strong position. And there is so much potential here for the Waterford School District. In addition to that, for that reputation, investing in all of those programmings, I think I saw that there were, I think it was maybe $3.2 million that's been invested in academic programming within just the last couple of years, along with the building enhancements, the technology infrastructure and instructional technology taking place. All of those things are an incredible platform to build off from. I would be extraordinarily excited about that, and I felt that it probably was rooted a little bit with the drive to compete better with schools of choice and making some of those strategic moves to enhance those areas. So this was definitely one that I was really wanting to dig into a little bit more. But when it comes down to that sustainability and reputation of the district, it really starts with having that core programming in place, that before we do anything else well, we are really doing our core business at an extraordinary level, which is really around mathematics and literacy and other core discipline areas. So those are some of the ways that I've already started to analyze the district a little bit, some of the things that are exciting to me, and then bridging from that, figuring out how to brand the district, being able to build on top of what already is occurring. I came across the campaign for the Future is, I think it's the Future is Bright campaign and a few other things. So it seems like there's a great foundation in place, and partnering with the team that is leading some of those initiatives and seeing where we might lead to next.
Thank you. We're now going to pass the microphone over to Secretary Torres, please.
Thank you. Tell us about a challenge you've experienced in bringing a diverse group of people to consensus on a difficult issue. How did you provide leadership, and what was the outcome?
Thank you. So one of the greatest challenges in the last few years I would definitely say is working on catchment areas. And if you have not had the joy of working on catchment areas or having to redraw district boundaries for elementary schools and middle schools, you are really missing out. It is a very, very difficult process, and it comes with a lot of passionate people. And so this is one of the areas where I could give you some insight of how I might navigate a really difficult, challenging situation, knowing that really what we're trying to do is we're trying to provide guidance and comfort for neighborhoods that might end up being pulled apart or in different directions, or grouping of kids might be split up. So the way that I went through that process was really developing like a central guidance team that also include board members, because this is the type of decision making that is going to be felt from the classroom level all the way up to the boardroom. And making sure that we had those different conversations and doing a good analysis. I partnered with Platt Moran as well to really do a long range study of our population growth in these different neighborhoods, because we also wanted to limit the amount of times that we might have to adjust catchment areas. And really working with stakeholder groups, visiting PTO meetings, doing an invite to anyone who wanted to give input, a lot of surveying. But I think what really led to the success were two key pieces. One was the guiding principles that I helped the leadership team develop. And within the digital portfolio that I gave you and in your packet, I have catchment in there, and you'll be able to read through some of those guiding principles, and letting those guiding principles really drive the decision making. And what we weren't going to do is we weren't going to split neighborhoods in half. We were looking to try to keep neighborhoods as a whole group, even if they had to change the elementary school that they were going to. And one of the reasons why we had to do this is we were returning upper elementary, taking them out of the middle schools and returning them back to the elementary buildings. So now we had to adjust those catchment areas. Through all of that, as well as putting in like a legacy piece with current students, that really end up being a success. And the way I'm going to define success is after going through this process over a year and a half, partnering, being collaborative, really listening, understanding people's perspective. At the end of the day, I think we were down to about 5 families that were still pretty upset. And with a district the size of ours, and with something so significant, that was probably maybe the best that we were going to get at that point. And so it's been a success. We've been able to maintain those catchment areas to help our programming and the reconfigurations of schools that we have. So that's one of the challenges I can think of in the last few years has been pretty significant, and then working through all those layers and all the different stakeholders to come to some good decision making around it.
Thank you. We'll now pass the microphone, please, down to Trustee Joslin.
How do you maintain visibility and accessibility for staff, parents, and community groups?
So I provided you a 90-day plan, and in that 90-day plan, I discuss and outline some of the priorities I would have with forging strong relationships and establishing trust. Some of those are, to kind of highlight a few of those pieces, it would be meet and greets, school visits, introductions, either through newsletters or videos, community partnerships, certainly having visibility at district events, visibility at community events and businesses, making sure that I'm connecting with the PTO. If you have a special education parent advisory committee, which I believe you do, I remember reading that, boosters, the foundation, and then really looking for that connectedness and openness. I think that every place that I've been, people have found that I'm certainly approachable. I am definitely listening. That's how I get a lot of information. That's how I understand. I really consider it of like how important it is to understand various perspectives and different thoughts and opinions on different topics. So those are some of the things that you could expect, and I outlined that in the 90-day plan for you as well.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it now to Trustee Patricia, please.
Share an experience that illustrates your commitment and capacity to provide an inclusive and responsive environment for all students and staff, while also ensuring a transparent decision-making process.
Being transparent is just fundamental in public education, and that's certainly a cornerstone. And I wanted to mention that first before, because it's such a natural way of moving about our work that it's not always something to think to highlight. So as I move through this, please know that that's at the cornerstone of everything. I discussed math earlier. What I didn't discuss was the way that we moved into that, which was conducting some empathy interviews for students that have traveled all the way through that math programming since kindergarten to seniors, and really going through and asking them about their experiences along the way. That was probably some of the most useful data that we were able to capture before moving into that redesign process. And with that in mind too, also looking at, who were we underserving, through an equity lens, what are some areas that we could make some improvements before we redesign? We want to make sure that we're redesigning where we're going to start getting demographics in our high rigorous mathematic courses, the same demographics that match our school demographics. So that was really the approach and the driving force, that we wanted to see those same representations in our demographic data, also sitting in AP Calc, also sitting in pre-AP Calculus, that we wanted to see those similar demographics and looking at it through that lens. In addition to that, I think another thing that comes to mind is a lot of the work that we've done with special education and strategic planning around that, and through considerable bond work, and it looks like this district has been doing that almost the exact same time frame as Bloomfield Hills as well. So I recognize a lot of those pieces and designs, and I think we even have some of the same partners as well. I think I saw that you're partnering with Barton Mallow and a few of the other agencies that we connect with as well. And with that, a design where we were going to put special education services at the center of our schools and build out from there. And that's hard to do when you're dealing with schools that were built in the 60s, early 70s, because that wasn't necessarily at the forefront of anyone's mind when that design was taking place. But when we went to go redesign our schools, it definitely through an equity lens was going to be a key feature for us. And redesigning those spaces through that inclusivity lens, making sure that that was going to be a priority. And then I've also wanted to mention equal opportunity schools, relating that back to math. And I wasn't sure if you were partnering with equal opportunity schools. I wasn't able to find that, but that's one of the pieces that what we're doing is a real big push and a passion of mine is to see similar demographics of a building, to also see that in our AP courses. And then how we focus on guiding students either by surveying what their passions, their interests are, so that we can coach them and guide them into the right pathway as we're moving into that 11th and 12th grade year, so that we don't have any subgroups that are underrepresented in those courses. And that's a little bit different than always focusing on proficiency rates. Sometimes you can almost become too focused on that you just are continuously treating the symptom, as opposed to really what's the access and opportunity, or what's the opportunity gap in the access to these higher level courses that also lead to higher proficiency rates. So equal opportunity schools, we have found them to be an incredible partner in that work, and I've also linked that within the digital portfolio too, if you're a little bit more interested in it.
Thank you. Trustee Sutherland now.
Thank you. How do you decide when it's appropriate to involve others, such as teachers, other administrators, students, parents, or the board, in your decision-making process?
Well, to be truthful, I really can't think of a time or where it would be inappropriate to involve all of those people in a decision-making process. Even if they're not directly in the room with you, it's extraordinarily important to understand that perspective. And if I don't understand that, that's going to be my next step, is to go seek that out. So I feel like I'm very well practiced at of gathering that information along the way. I don't find that there are a lot of things that take me by surprise or that I'm not knowledgeable about when dealing with a difficult situation, because I'm trying to stay as informed as possible. And a lot of that is just is listening and understanding those different perspectives and bringing those people with you when you're making and as a critical component of being an informed decision maker. You know, and I certainly don't mention that, and I wouldn't want that to be misread that I'm apprehensive or indecisive either. I can be very decisive, particularly when I'm informed. But if I'm not, that's going to be my next step is becoming informed, making sure that I've done my homework and research, and bringing all of those stakeholders that were mentioned into my mind or whatever the challenge is while making some of those decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So considering your past accomplishments, what are some of the reasons for your success? And how have you overcome the difficulties you may have encountered?
I love this question because my teachers are the reason for my success. My teachers are the reason why I'm in education. I grew up on a 4-lane highway in Lansing during a time where interest rates were at 17%, an economy where a lot of parents, including my own, were really challenged financially. There was time that there wasn't money for the light bill or gas, and trash pickup starts to seem like a luxury when it's been a few months and it's just sort of piling in the garage. I can remember a car being repossessed, and knowing these particular periods where finances were really slim in the household. But I feel privileged that I had a childhood like that, because it has truly given me a lot of strengths and perspective. It taught me about sacrifice. It taught me that both my parents working nights wasn't a bad thing. It meant that that's how they were finding their way to afford our modest home in a good school district. I might not have always been able to see them in the evenings, but they never missed a single football game or wrestling meet. I'm not sure how they did that, but they were always there. And what I got from that was quite a bit of grit. It was my coaches that really taught me how to pick myself back up, how you move forward, how you move through those challenges. And I can remember my second grade teacher, Mrs. Anderson. She would share her lunch with me if I was too hungry to think or to participate. And I had just incredible teachers that saw through the holes in my shoes or uncut hair. I had a 6th grade teacher that, just looking at my test quizzes, decided to move me over in accelerated math. And that really put me on a path to be a math teacher. Without that decision, that's one of the reasons why I'm really passionate about mathematics education and making sure that those opportunities are there for kids to reach high levels of math. It's allowed me to change socioeconomic status, my background in math, and it's really afforded me the opportunity to provide a better childhood experience for my own children. I used to think that education was even a career that I chose, and the older I get, the more I realize this profession chose me. And and this is why I'm in education. This is what I'm passionate about. It has also led me to understand that it's my own purpose and it's my why. I'm here to support kids. I'm here to support teachers, administrators, and families. And I really appreciate the perspective that I gained during that time and those challenges that I had to work through. And for me, this is a simple equation, and one that drives me and keeps me excited about teaching and learning every day. I absolutely love what I do. I love supporting my buildings, families, and students. And I know that I'm drawing a lot of that from how the way I was supported, and that education for me was a way to really move socioeconomic status away from me to improve livelihood for my own children. And what an incredible impact, especially when I look back and think about the people who had that impact. And now I'm just trying to give that back now as an adult.
you so much.
Yeah.
Back to Vice President Wagner, please.
What does an effective relationship between the board and superintendent look like, and how do you cultivate such a relationship?
Definitely a foundation in trust and good communication, clarity in communication. What I imagine is to have a pattern of interactions, both formal and informal, being accessible to all of you, us having a foundation and norms with the way that we might interact and share information. I would be looking for your guidance with preference of how to share information. What would that pattern be, whether it's weekly updates or type of information that you want coming into study sessions. So I would really be looking for your partnership and guidance on a lot of those communication pieces. But I think the foundation of that is trust, being collaborative, knowing what our goals and ambitions are, not only for ourselves as a team, but also for our families. And that knowing that we're part of something bigger than just us. And the way that we move about and make decisions, and that we're collaborative and communicative. So I think that those are some of those essential key components, as well as trying to limit as many surprises as possible. I'm very good at anticipating of different issues that come up, of where those conversations might lead. So if anything, I'll probably over-communicate sometimes, but that's just because I'm not very fond of surprises, so I would like to have a lot of that information in front of you.
Thank you. Treasurer Donahue, please.
Please tell us about your experience with school finance and how you develop budgets that gain broad support.
Well, if you've been in education as long as I have, you definitely know the ups and downs of school finance and a lot of the significant challenges that we've faced over the years. And I first come into that in a conservative and protective view. I guess I'll draw back on that word sustainability again. That was in a previous question. And for me, this is important. When my father's toolbox came home, I knew what that meant for the next few weeks. I knew the impact that was going to have on the household. And it's also the mindset that I go in when looking at a budget, that we also have an entire school community that we are taking care of. And some of those mistakes can lead to unnecessary consequences of our staff members. And I always look through that with a careful lens, because having that experience myself, it's very important to me that people are taken care of, that we're going to have strong financial health within the district. And I would also be relying on my team for that and their pieces. Over the years, I've have an extensive amount of work in helping prepare budgets, being able to anticipate, looking at the impact that grants will have, studying those over amount of time, being able to anticipate what shifts would be, and I'll even jump back into catchment areas when we were doing that. That was also calling for a consolidation of middle schools. We're a district of about 5,200 students, and we had 3 middle schools, and it was really starting to impact our programming, because we might have only, perhaps 4 students in an orchestra at a middle school, because we just didn't have, maybe we only had 70 7th graders all together. And however, over time, what the district was doing is moving upper elementary into those schools. It was a good use of the facility, but it was really degrading programming. The problem with consolidating schools is then it threatens of your sustainability for staff as you hit those efficiencies. And just to kind of give you a sense of the way that I look through budgets is working with the assistant superintendent of HR at the time. We did a quick analysis on our attrition rate, how we could, leading up to that consolidation of schools, that we could run lean in some areas, know that we would be over, but knew that it was only going to be about a 3-year time frame, that we were going to be able to make all of that transition work with that reconsolidation just through our attrition rates. And we're able to achieve that with being able to sustain that budget and making sure that we were leveraging some of those moves, that there were no large surprises within that. So I have an extensive amount of time. I've also have been through all of your audit reports. I've looked at your center funds, your capital outlay. So I've been through a lot of those pieces, and I keep coming back to wanting really to study a little bit more around schools of choice and the impact that might have on funding as I look at the ratio of students coming and going within the district. So that's an area that I keep wanting to find myself digging into a little bit further.
Thank you. Let's pass the microphone now to Secretary Torres, please.
How do you recruit, develop, and lead a management team? Give us an example of how you've done this in the past.
Well, I very much enjoy coaching leadership, and one of the things I'm very passionate about is teacher leadership as well. In the profession of education, it can actually be difficult to have a lot of ladders for people who are interested or aspire to a new position, and that's why I think it's really important to always be building your bench and creating those opportunities. So I first start with that in mind of opportunities for teacher leadership and how working with administration we can make improvements not only on programming but also on student outcomes. And then from there, designing leadership teams that's going to foster that teacher leadership, that those central office teams or those administrative teams, that a primary function of those teams is to foster that leadership and to grow future leadership. That's something that's extraordinarily important to me, especially now that we're moving into a new era of what hiring looks like and how limited staffing or how challenging staffing can be, that we really have to be looking at models where we're growing our own leadership, that we're investing in people, giving them the opportunities and ladders for their own career growth. And so I do a lot of those. I also do a lot of check-ins. I work collaboratively, and building leadership is something that I enjoy doing, and particularly around funneling all the way back to teacher leadership. That really ends up being a starting point for me, and then growing that from there.
Thank you. Turn the microphone over to Trustee Joslin, please.
What unique skills or leverage could you bring to this position, and how will the Waterford School District be served by this?
I definitely have a strong and proven track record at improving student outcomes. All the places I've been, I've had a track record for doing that, even going all the way back to Dryden Elementary or Dryden Community Schools in Lapeer County, and within a couple years, really being able to position that district to have the highest scores in Lapeer County. Bloomfield Hills doing the same thing there, working at Sashbaugh Middle School. That's always been my drive, is really focused on those student outcomes and using data. I would be bringing that with me, as well as my reputation for having very strong knowledge base on instructional practices and programming. That happens to be something that I'm very passionate about. I enjoy that. I enjoy that work. And something that's a little bit personal for me too is you know, I have as a parent, I have my own child that benefits from an IEP, and certainly understand the challenges that brings. That's always been an area of strength of mine, because I'm able to hear the family in a more authentic way sometimes than with people who don't have that personal experience. I've also been lucky that in every district I've been in, I've either been running a center program or some type of categorical special education program, which is one of the reasons why special education is such a priority in Bloomfield Hills. And the starting point 8 years ago was really looking at how many students were having to be sent out of the district to be able to be serviced based on what their needs, and figuring out how can we bring our kiddos home. You know, I think the true measure one of the true measures of any community is how it takes care of its most vulnerable students. And for me, it was a quest to really figure out how can we bring as many students back into our buildings as possible, bring them back into their neighborhoods. And through the bond, through that strategic planning, having that personal experience as a parent myself, that's always been an area of strength for me. And in addition to that, I would say the way that I am networked, I'd be able to leverage that. I have several connections through Oakland County at the national level, as well partnerships with Project Zero, Harvard's Project Zero, and probably one of the things that I think is most interesting right now is the Future of Learning Council here in Michigan, and the work that is currently being focused on right now through that council around AI, instructional technology, connecting that to career pathways. I think that would be something we'd very much be able to leverage here in Waterford.
Back to Trustee Petrucia, please.
Describe how you function and communicate effectively and respectfully to staff and community within the context of varying beliefs, behaviors, and backgrounds.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I keep looking over at the clock because I'm trying to manage my time a little bit, so it's not in an easy eyesight. I have to kind of curve over that far, but thank you for that question. I really think that starts with listening first and seeking to understand, and lead by example. But it really also has to be rooted in building a responsive culture, that the entire organization needs to be able to do that. We need to see our beliefs and actions. We need to see our behaviors match our core values. We need to see that the way that we support students is aligned with our commitments. And so it takes an entire organization and to be able to do that. And the way that I would say is my primary strategy is just building a responsive culture so that that is being done at all levels and being able to foster that, build those relationships and those connectedness as well as that expectation.
Trustee Sutherland, please.
Thank you. Can you tell us about a time when you created a work environment in which people wanted to do their best, and how did you create that climate? What was the result?
Absolutely. It just so happens I was the middle school principal in Clarkston, and we were doing these instructional tours both for national conferences and then also just for local school districts. Some administrators from Rochester were also part of that, part of some of those tours, and I quickly found myself being recruited to work over in Rochester as a principal in a building that they were describing to me as a little bit dysfunctional. Intrigued with that, I very much enjoyed that experience because what I found was an incredibly talented group of individuals, but they were talented in individual ways. But I also found them at that time at the school where compliance may have been a little bit too much valued within the district. And my strategy there was really with this incredibly talented group of professional teachers is finding out what their passions were. And the result of that, just that connectedness and having trust and being able to grow. And then I was also coming to the point in my career where like my skill set was really starting to come together around that instructional coaching. So prior to that, maybe I was an apprentice doing that, and then by the time I met this group of teachers, I had really sort of hit my stride in terms of what does true, authentic instructional coaching look like. What grew out of that was action research. From that, I had teachers that were passionate about all different types of research strands. We pulled heavily on a lot of the research that comes out of Harvard School of Education, and Project Zero, and the chief investigators there. There are all different types of strands of pedagogical research to connect to. I had one teacher that was doing concept mapping, but in a physical space, like it was actually three-dimensional with his third graders. Mr. Lewis was just so excited about this, and I had another teacher investigating physical space as a cultural force. We were doing curation journals. We were doing metaphoric painting. And what grew out of that is I have former staff members now that have been published, or they not only have they published themselves, but maybe they are a key feature or highlighted in someone else's research. I've had this group go on to be principals, to be consultants, and just an incredible group of people. And so that's a time where I can think of people were enjoying really what grew into an authentic collective efficacy model, and that they were pushing each other, that they were, not in a negative way, but they were just excited about the action research that was taking place. And to see the students immersed in that type of culture and the way that we were building intellectual character, it was truly a joy, and a lot of them are still doing that work today.
Thank you so much for that. If you would please describe your experience as an educational advocate at the local, state, or national level.
Absolutely. So I mentioned a little bit about partnerships around Project Zero, but I've also been a speaker at Ed Leader 21 on Sense of Belonging. That's another national network. I've been able to speak and present at MDE conferences on school improvement, RTI or MTSS. Even recently, I had the Casey Network reach out to host a national conference, but unfortunately our bond construction was in the way of that. But I'm certainly hopeful that as they look to the Midwest again, they'll be reaching out at some point, and that challenge won't be there. I've also taken the opportunity to advocate around safety and security through my own networks or new networks that I have formed or relationships that I have built, whether it's reviewing legislation or helping look at response to school shootings or preventative measures. That's an area that I've been an advocate for as well. So there's a lot of different components to that. An advocate for special education students and families, having the supports in place. Our industry around mental health in the state of Michigan is certainly struggling, and it can take a long time for a family just to move through something that should be simple, whether they're looking for a psychologist or a therapist, or they're working through to see the right pediatrician. A lot of these resources can be scarce, and it takes a lot of time for families to move through that. So trying to stay connected and being able to offer resources to help expedite that process sometimes. So those are a few ways where I try to be an advocate at the local, state, or national level. And then also what I would look forward to is partnering with you on, what do we want to advocate together for? What do we want to find ourselves in DC? Who do we want to meet with? Or in Lansing, what are some of those connections that we can make, and what are we advocating for on behalf of the families and students in Waterford School District?
Thank you. Vice President Wagner.
Tell us how you have used your knowledge of student learning and educational research to guide curriculum development and increase student achievement.
Absolutely. So, this is at the core of what I do on a regular basis, not only supporting buildings and principals and teachers, but also looking at our programming, doing analysis, making informed decisions, monitoring data. And a few things that come to mind recently is with 23G, and you might remember that as I think that's the Michigan Kids Back on Track grant. 35J was a literacy grant. Some of those came out pretty quickly, so you had to move at a pretty fast pace to grab onto some of those grants. And then looking through, particularly with 35J, we were successful in acquiring that grant, but then also are leveraging it to help round out and balance our literacy programming, taking a look and reviewing science of reading and how that can blend in. Where are some shortcomings that we have in our current programming based on the data that we're reviewing, and being able to use that grant to be able to fill some of those pieces. Also looking at it to bolster up our MTSS and special education programming, and with 23G, being able to provide targeted tutoring services for students in need. And through those different pieces, really trying to take a look at the research and the connectedness, even making sure that in the backdrop, what was feeding 35J was research in dyslexia, and that we're well prepared and have a nice, robust MTSS process for students with dyslexia that's going to be built into our support system around early childhood literacy. So I think that's an area I'm wanting to look at the clock because this is an area I could sit in for a very, very long time, and I'm listening to my wife earlier say, be concise, move through the questions, don't go past your hour, and so and she's right by the clock, so I guess that's helpful. So I won't go into all those pieces, but definitely educational research is literally a passion of mine. I love to get lost in rabbit holes around new research that's coming out or be able to find new connections. I particularly like forging relationships with universities that are also research hubs in amongst themselves for education. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there to blend that, and I think K-12 education is getting much better at this as well. And then I guess I would jump back to the other question about advocacy, because I do believe, my worry is that these funding streams around this that are helping us with some of those targeted services or being able to review literacy programming, that if there's a short sustainability window for that's something that we could be advocating for to make sure that there is some longevity around those funding sources, that we don't lose those, because they really are having an impact. We are seeing the needle move on that, and it's allowing districts to be much more nimble in their programming and adjusting for things that they want to be able to backfill or enhance.
Okay. Mr. Bidlack, we started about 6:05. So we've got a
Okay.
little bit of time here. So this is an important question. So we appreciate, where's the microphone here? We appreciate, of course, your interest in becoming our next superintendent. But we want to know, do you have anything additional to share with us that we haven't talked about this evening?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wasn't, and I don't want to use this as like a free question, so I'm going to make up my own question here. But first, and before I even dive into that, I just want to thank you. An opportunity like this allows me to slow down and reflect professionally, reflect on my career. It's interesting how you start to lose the memory of a lot of the things you've done until you have to go back and recall. It's like, oh yes, I remember that project. I was actually blocking out catchment areas. I think I had tried to block that out of my mind, but yes, that was something that had to lead a district through. So it's very helpful to be able to pause in your everyday busy life to be able to go back and do that. So thank you so much for having me here and being able to move through those questions. Some of the areas of passion of mine are definitely within the realm of special education, supporting students. I would love to dive into that further. There's, in some of those areas, that's some of the places where I'm most proud, being able to help guide and fight for resources to be able to bolster up that programming. Another area I'm very intrigued in, and I know I mentioned a couple times, is really looking at the financial health of the district, and then coming back to having a lot of questions around schools of choice, as well as how many students are coming and going from the district. So I jumped in looking at that analysis at the programming and did like a quick comparison to some of the districts that students are going to, with also the programming that's here and the course options. And I find that's an area that I'm definitely intrigued in. I probably have more questions than anything right now, so it's something that I would definitely want to have more discussions around, and also feel like it's it's likely a backdrop for some of the strategic moves that seem like they should work very well in that category. Not only with branding and marketing, but also the investment in programming, particularly at early childhood, and trying to capture those families and look at long sustainability for keeping those families within the school district. I was really impressed. I had a chance to visit the Kettering football game this last Friday. I was really impressed with the facilities and just the climate, the atmosphere. As I was touring Mott High School, I was absolutely tickled that a golf cart passed me with a family on it with fishing poles sticking out of the side of that. And with, as somebody with a boat, thinking of a community with 34 lakes seems like unlimited possibilities. So it certainly is an exciting community. I've taken the opportunity to start touring some of the campuses, and I've been absolutely just impressed, not only with the facilities, but also with the reputation of your cabinet team, doing my own reference checks. And they certainly seem like a strong team that I would be excited to work with. So I think that's really where my headspace is at right now. I know you have a very important decision to make. And, but if I did have the opportunity to come back, I think I would want to talk a little bit more about special education, perhaps some of the branding opportunities, and what, you know, and what I am thinking is Waterford School District perhaps being one of the best kept secrets in Oakland County right now, based on my review and what I already know about the county and the districts, being in close proximity. I've been in northern Oakland County now, you know, raising a family for several years, or have worked in northern Oakland County, or I guess Bloomfield Hills is not too northern, but I guess because I travel north, I think of it as part of northern Oakland County. And there's a lot of exciting things happening with the state of Michigan right now. I would love to dive more into the state's strategic plan for focus industries and how that's going to impact our area. I don't know if you've noticed the FANUC building going up, what's taking place, formerly what was the Palace of Auburn Hills, what's being built there. The GM plant in Lake Orion is, I think, triple the size that it was a couple years ago. And then also with the Future of Learning Council, how do we start aligning our pathways to those career and industries that's going to be available in our area? Because as a parent myself, I want to know that not only are my children going to have a bright future in front of them, but they're also going to be able to do that and stay here where I live. And so how do we keep our own children here in Oakland County, here within the districts that we reside and we're raising them in, is making sure that they have good connectedness and pathways to the careers that are going to be available and the industry that's going to be available in our area. And so that's definitely something I would like to dive into. It seems like the state of Michigan is being much more focused with the strategic plan around its focus industries and how we would be able to dovetail that in with our own programming, which would give them certainly a competitive edge.
Well, Mr. Bidlack, we thank you so much for.
And it's 7 o'clock exactly.
You are right on, yes.
So.
Yes. Well, we appreciate you being here and joining us tonight for the conversation.
Absolutely.
And fielding our questions. As you know, we're continuing our interviews this evening, and if going forward you are selected as a finalist, we will be sure to let you know.
Okay,
So,
all right, thank you.
thank you so much again for being here tonight. We
All right.
appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
we're going to continue on with our interviews this evening, and we are going to welcome Thomas Ahart into the virtual Zoom room.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Can
Thank
you
you for accommodating me on Zoom.
Can you hear us just fine?
I can. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Great.
Can you please pronounce your last name for us?
Ahart.
Ahart. Okay, just as it looks. Okay, excellent. Colleagues, it's 7:10, 7:11. Okay, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. So, as you know, we've had a chance to review your resume. And to start us off this evening, we'd appreciate if you could please tell us what specifically interests you in the Waterford Superintendency and how your background and experiences make you a good fit to be our next superintendent.
Sure. A very good friend of mine grew up in Dearborn, so I've been in that, roughly in that area a number of times. Some of them, honestly, to travel to watch Iowa, Michigan football games. We don't need to get into that, I hope, right now. I find the area beautiful, and specific to Waterford, the almost perfect mix of a small community adjacent to everything that a large metro area has to offer. But most importantly for my wife and me is where we hope to move only once in my career, and I've been blessed to have a long stint in Des Moines. But we have a son who's in 7th grade, and we hope to move just once. And we want to make sure that he's able to continue his middle school and high school education in an excellent system, which is very clear Waterford brings to the table.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. So I'm now going to turn it over to Vice President Wagner for a question.
Please share an example of a time you have led a sustained multi-year improvement initiative, such as a strategic plan. Be specific regarding the situation, the task at hand, your specific role, and the outcome.
Okay, I'll speak to, it wasn't necessarily a strategic plan. However, this particular initiative did require a rather detailed strategic plan. I served as the Associate Superintendent for Teaching and Learning for 1 year before becoming Superintendent. And in that time, one of my discoveries was that the grades that we were issuing students at all levels did not align well with our results on our state test. And I dug into that pretty deeply and discovered that really we had no coherence to our grading system. So a group of us in my cabinet explored some options, and what we landed on was moving to a standards referenced grading system. Not something that I'm an advocate for in all situations, but in this particular circumstance, it was a very good fit for what we needed. So we mapped out a 5-year plan. We knew it would take a little bit longer than that to completely have it in place, but we knew we needed very specific actions with specific outcomes to happen on a specific timeline for us to really change a century-old system of grading. It was really a culture changer for families, for teachers, for everyone involved in the school. So we put together a rough plan, and then we immediately involved at first teachers to get them on board, to help them understand the rationale for moving in this direction, and then had a large group of teachers involved in actually mapping out that detailed plan, where we would start, how we would roll in additional grade levels, etc., and how we would have consistency from elementary through middle and through high school, so that when students learned the system, they didn't have a new game to learn when they moved from one building to another building as they matriculated through the system. And then probably the biggest challenge was was convincing all of our families that this was something that in the end was going to benefit their children and not just be a new thing that they would have to deal with that would result in confusion. And so we spent a tremendous amount of time in small meetings, town hall type meetings in every neighborhood, multiple times actually, to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to ask their questions and get a complete and thorough response to their questions and any concerns that they might have. We, counterintuitively perhaps, we started the implementation at our middle school level, which is where we saw the most discrepancy among our 10 middle schools. And we knew that was going to be a challenge, but once we had 6, 7, and 8 solidly in place, that we started to go down into elementary and up into high school as we continued to implement and refine the plan. What we learned almost immediately at the middle school level, even after the first year, was that we had a much higher percentage of our students testing in the advanced proficient range on our state tests. Before it had been a very, very small percentage, less than 5%, and we jumped up to beyond 10% just in that first year. And then ultimately we saw much fewer scoring in the below proficient category. And we attribute that almost exclusively to students having much more clarity about what their actual skill level was and getting very meaningful feedback on the work that they completed with their teachers, and creating a platform really for teachers to have the right conversations with their students and with their families with regard to the district and state standards and where that student was meeting or failed to meet those standards. And we saw that same outcome as we rolled that out over the next 5 years, 6 years really, through the rest of the district, including pre-K.
Thank you so much. We're going to turn the microphone over to Treasurer Donahue, please.
All right. As our superintendent, how would you work to ensure and enhance the sustainability and reputation of our district?
Two things I think are pertinent to this. Number one, I strive very hard to lead by example and to model the behavior that I expect from my staff, that I expect from my students, and that I want the community to associate with their school district. So acting with integrity, being forthright and clear in my communications, not just with the board, but to the broader community. And then secondly, regarding sustainability, and I know there's a question about more related to finance, but something that I take very seriously is my role in superintendent is the role of being a steward of our public's money, our public's resources. And so I'll talk more about budgeting when we get to that question, but I always want to be able to demonstrate to my community in a very transparent way how it is that we're investing the money that they've endowed to the district, and how it is that they're getting a return on investment in terms of student results. So transparency is the big one, transparency and integrity, and then stewardship are all three sort of linchpins on how I approach leadership as a superintendent.
Thank you so much. We're now going to pass the microphone to Secretary John Paul Torres.
Tell us about a challenge you've experienced in bringing a diverse group of people to consensus on a difficult issue. How did you provide leadership, and what was the outcome?
Soon after becoming superintendent, I had a number of board members who spoke to me one-on-one about changing the school start times in our district. We had our high schools and middle schools starting at about 7:30 to 7:45 a.m., and our elementary schools were starting between 8:30 and 9 a.m. we had a significant issue with late arrivals in the secondary at the secondary level, and certainly the science behind when and how much sleep, especially adolescents and pre-adolescents, need is pretty clear. The district, prior to my arrival, had attempted to flip the start times, and for whatever reason, couldn't get it done. I fully agreed with their wish to have that happen. However, I did say that I felt we would need to figure out a way to do it in a budget neutral way because of the state of our finances, and that I really needed them to be serious about this, so that if we did that full on, you know what a change like that requires in a school district, and engaging literally your entire community and educating them on an idea, and then for a significant segment of them selling them on the idea was going to be time consuming, and no matter how well you execute on something like that, you're literally changing the lives of every single parent and student and employee. So we wanted to do it once, and we wanted to do it right. As you can imagine, there was not universal agreement on, number one, changing the start times, because families with elementary students only felt that it would be an inconvenience. And I realize I'm painting with a broad brush here, but that was the pattern. And parents with only secondary students thought it was actually a good thing. Parents that had students in both elementary and secondary were sort of a wash. So convincing staff, number one, was the first chore. To help them understand what their new schedule would look like if we made a change, and getting a critical mass of support from our staff that our students are going to perform better if we allow those students that need to be able to sleep later into the morning to do that, and not be fighting that as they come into school every day. And for the elementary staff, that their day would be starting approximately an hour earlier. The second big chore was actually creating a plan that we could execute with the shortage of bus drivers that we had, and the shortage of buses that we had. We had to run 2 tiers. We basically had to run elementary and get that complete, and then run secondary, and in order for it to work. So how it panned out was, again, and I'm a big believer in this, providing a wide range of opportunities for community members to actually ask questions. We surveyed, of course, to ensure that we got feedback from a very high percentage of our families, and a survey actually took place 4 different times as we got closer and closer to a final plan. But providing sort of town hall type meetings in different parts of the community at different times of the day and evening to make sure everybody had an absolute convenient opportunity to get their questions asked and their concerns answered. The other piece of this that was really important for us was to meet with leaders in the faith community, because they have an avenue to communicate with segments of the population that we don't necessarily effectively communicate with, or they can communicate in a different way, maybe is a better way to say it. And then a wide range of our community partners. The NAACP, LULAC, the Asian Latino Alliance, United Way, getting the word out in as many different places as we could, so that there were no surprises, and that the community knew when the decisions on various points of the plan were going to be made, and that they had ample opportunity even before board meetings where they were also welcome to speak, but they had ample opportunity to get their 2 cents worth in. And then we also had a plan for evaluating the success of the change out through the first year of implementation, so that we could see what happened with behavior, if anything. So we could see what happened with absences and tardies, if anything, so we could see what happened with academic success. And so we calendared in our board meetings once a month a report out on changes relative to the start times. The outcome was very favorable. The families that were most opposed found out that it wasn't the impossible task that it sounded like when they first learned about it. Attendance actually improved at both the secondary and the elementary level, and I can't tie this as concretely as I would like, but behavior challenges with our elementary students actually was on the decrease that year. And I'm not sure I can tie that to the earlier start time, but it did happen. It coincided with the timing there. So
Thank you.
it was a big change for everybody, much like the standards reference to grading. And anytime you do that, you need to genuinely engage the community in a meaningful way, not just a surface level, and you have to communicate with transparency.
Thank you so much for that. We're going to turn the microphone to Trustee Julie Joslin.
How do you maintain visibility and accessibility for staff, parents, and community groups?
So one of the things that's attractive to me about Waterford is the number of schools. In Des Moines, I had 70 different sites, and I before every academic year started, I had made a schedule for myself that included a visit at each one of our campuses for no reason but then to visit the campus and to check in with the staff and the administration at that school. And that was a task that I was only successful at twice in my 10 years. I came really close most of the time, but when you talk about not burning, but using at least a half a day for each of those visits, and you have about 180 school days, the time evaporates really quickly. So having a smaller number of buildings is really attractive to me. I always make it a point to do a job alike also with various staff members. So I'll work in their food service department for a day, doing whatever it is they tell me to do. I'll work at the transportation department. Usually they only trust me to ride along with a bus driver. But I make sure that I'm spending a day in each of our departments, even if it doesn't seem that it's closely related to student achievement, because how it is that we operate and the culture that we develop flows very quickly to the experience that our students have. And so I like to be sure that everybody knows who I am, and that it's never a surprise to see me pop up, in someone's office or someone's school or someone's building, because they need to see me as a part of the team, and not just the chief up in the ivory tower. With community groups, I would, if I were to have the privilege of serving in Waterford, I would first learn from you all at the board who our most important community partners are. And I would reach out to them and then schedule, if they were willing, a regular meeting schedule. A lot of those for the groups that I met with regularly in Des Moines ended up being a quarterly meeting. We would design those agendas in conjunction with one another and sometimes the meetings were very brief, and sometimes, depending on what was happening in the district or what was happening in the greater community, those could be lengthy meetings. But the goal is that we have an ongoing conversation with the community, and we're not just touching base when there's a particular challenge that we need to overcome, but that we see each other as partners in this work, and we develop our relationship according to that tone. With parents, I like to do, and there's lots of different ways to do this, but I would have coffees this might sound a little corny, but our local Hy-Vee grocery stores in Des Moines have little cafes that people frequent when they grocery shop, and so they were always willing to let me sit down, have a cup of coffee, and have that be advertised so people could pop in and talk with me on a monthly basis. That was one way that we did it. I also am very, very disciplined in replying to phone and email messages. Everybody gets a response from me in a timely manner. Sometimes the response is, I don't have enough time to address that right now, but before the weekend, you'll receive a more thorough response, something like that. But everybody has to know that this is our community's school, and we have a responsibility to be held accountable to the broader community, and particularly to parents. And then I would take the lead from this group, from the board, on what has worked in the past in terms of providing opportunities for parents to, to build relationships with the superintendent.
Thank you. We're gonna pass the microphone to Trustee Petruccio, please.
Share an experience that illustrates your commitment and capacity to providing an inclusive and responsive environment for all students and staff, while also ensuring a transparent decision-making process. No, I don't want to repeat it.
No, you don't need to.
Thank you. I can't.
This is something that I take very seriously. It's really important that that all members of the community, staff, students, parents, other stakeholders, regardless of the role that they have or don't have relative to the district, and regardless of identity, know that they are valued by the district, and that their opinions count no less than anyone else's, and that they know that they can have a voice, and that decisions are not being made in isolation from them. I'll share with you, this was something that became much more difficult than I had anticipated. I will admit that, and I laugh at myself now when I think about how naive I was. But in Des Moines, we have 5 comprehensive high schools. One high school is landlocked and has no athletic facilities except for the gymnasium, and so they have to, and a baseball diamond and softball diamond. Everything else for outdoor athletics, they have to travel somewhere else. We have another high school that has a really nice football stadium that they share with a local private university, Grandview University. They're located only 3 or 4 blocks from one another. The stadium is located on the east campus, and we've had a very successful sharing arrangement there for a few decades. And then we have 3 other schools that have a stadium, but they had been essentially neglected in terms of maintenance, meaningful maintenance, for a long period of time. I was very well aware of this, and I had done a study to see how much money we would need just to do necessary renovations and bring all of the stadiums up to code. And I could not fathom how how we would ever generate that kind of money. And once we were finished with that, what was going to be over $26 million in investment, we wouldn't really have anything better than we currently have. It would just be up to code. So I had worked literally for years trying to solve this problem, and had talked with a lot of our partners in the community, thinking of ways that we could address it. Finally, I met with the president of Drake University, and he said, are you still looking to build a stadium? I said, yeah, if everything would fall into place, I am, because the problems in the existing stadiums are only getting more pressing, and soccer is growing like gangbusters, and nowhere in the district did we have a regulation soccer pitch. So that was kind of embarrassing. So we ended up working out a deal where they sold us a chunk of land adjacent to their basketball facility for $1, and we paid about 80% of the cost of the stadium, which was about $20 million, and we own it, the district owns it, and Drake's responsible for all ongoing repairs and maintenance. So there's no ongoing general fund expense to the district whatsoever. Now, selling this to the community as a win was this is the part that was the real challenge. Each of our neighborhoods, understandably, has a lot of pride in their school, in their high school especially, and they feared that if everybody played at this centralized stadium, that their attendance would go down, that students wouldn't want to go out for football or go out for soccer because they weren't playing on their home school turf, so on and so forth. So I really went through the ringer on this one. We had a number of meetings that were extremely well attended, and were attended mostly by folks who did not think this was a good idea. And I understood that. When I was in high school, I went through went to a really small high school, and my junior year we ended up not having enough players to field a football team, so we had to join forces with our arch nemesis down the road, and the students were really excited about it. The adults were the ones that really made it a challenge, and that was really what the problem was here. And so when I finally woke up to this fact, I encouraged more and more students to show up at these town halls and express their views. They played most of their games, if they weren't in Des Moines, were in the suburbs, where they had really nice stadiums with artificial turf, and everything was new, and none of them had a really state-of-the-art facility like that to play in, and they valued that experience. So the more I got our student athletes to speak up and say what they wanted and what they thought would serve them best, the more the momentum started to shift toward what we knew was the only fiscally responsible decision that we could make. And in the end, the stadium actually just opened this fall, and it's a tremendous success. The attendance is actually higher than it has been on average. The facility is beautiful, and it was designed such that whichever team is hosting, we can make it look like it's their home field. So again, transparency had to be at the forefront, and sometimes it's really, really hard to do when you're looking at initial opposition. But in the long run, you need to maintain the community's trust, and they need to understand the why behind what are sometimes difficult but appropriate decisions.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. We're going to turn the microphone now to Trustee Joan Sutherland for the next question, please.
Thank you. How do you decide when it's appropriate to involve others, such as teachers, other administrators, students, parents, or the board, in your decision-making process?
That's a question that I've not heard before, but I think it's a really smart question. I try to go by a simple rule. This decision is going to impact whom and to what extent. So if I'm making, when I really think about it, there are not that many decisions that I make on my own. One of the few is it going to be a snow day tomorrow or not? Nobody wants to take part in making that decision. So I get to hold that one solo. But if something's going to impact teachers, they'll know about it in advance of a decision being made, and we'll have an opportunity to weigh in. One of those groups that I meet with regularly is the Teachers Association. And again, we have a standing agenda that both of us can fill prior, to our monthly meetings. And sometimes, like during COVID, we increased those meetings to once a week because there was so much change happening, so many changes coming from the state at rapid fire that we needed to meet that frequently in order to kill misinformation and disinformation, and to make sure that as much as possible teachers had a voice in the conditions that they would be working under during that time. Administrators, again, too, I do make it a habit to meet regularly with all administrative staff. Certainly I meet weekly with my cabinet, but I also think it's really important for the entire administrative team to be together on a regular basis, and hopefully, because of its size, Waterford would be a place where that's more feasible than it was in Des Moines. Because I want them to know what's going on, even if there are things that I don't think will impact them, if they impact the district or will have a potential impact on budget, etc. I want them to be in the know. I want to be as transparent as possible, so that number one, they have an accurate source of information, and number two, if they hear misinformation, they already know what the real story is, and can help put those little fires out that tend to pop up now and again based on misinformation. And then parents, if we're making a decision, I've referenced a couple already, changing bell times. That's definitely something that's going to impact parents directly, so I want them to be part of the decision-making process. The centralized soccer stadium, I want them to have input because it's going to impact their students and their families. And that's sort of how I go about it. With the board, it tends to be easier because hopefully in the board bylaws, that's actually spelled out pretty specifically. But even when it's not, one of my goals with my board is to never have them hear about something in the community prior to hearing it from me first. Whether that's good news or challenging news, I want the board to never be in a situation where they feel like they're caught off guard. So even if it's not part of the board decision-making process, I always make sure, as much as I can, that the board is in the know about everything that's happening in the district. And then with administrators, the principals should know what decisions they're at liberty to make on their own or with their teams without central office input. And they should also be clear on what decisions require some consultation with the district. I try to be very clear on what we're really tight on and what we're really loose on, so that everybody has clarity.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So our next question, considering your past accomplishments, what are some of the reasons for your success? And how have you overcome the difficulties you may have encountered? And Mr. Ahart, we have about 25 minutes left.
We only have 5 minutes left?
25, excuse me.
Oh, 25, okay, you scared me. I know I'm long-winded, but I really do think that a lot of my success is due in large part to having spent 11 years as a classroom teacher before moving into administration. One of the things I think that education has gotten wrong, in large part, is moving people into administrative positions when they've only had 3 or 4 years in the classroom. That's not long enough to become a good teacher, and it's certainly not long enough, at least for 99% of them, to be in a position to provide meaningful coaching to the teachers who are under their care as a principal. So I do think that having spent 11 years in the classroom, I've experienced the ebbs and flows of a school year that the teachers experience. I understand that student-teacher classroom dynamic, and I always have that perspective in the back of my mind as I move through all of the other duties of the superintendency. In terms of difficulties, I've certainly encountered my share of difficulties. I don't think there's a superintendent who could say otherwise. What has served me well, again, in addition to my experience as 11 years as a classroom teacher, I've served in a variety of roles that greatly impact the superintendency. I've served as the director of human resources. I've served as the curriculum director. I've served as a principal in an extremely challenging circumstance. And I think having spent real time on the ground in those roles really helps inform how I view the system, and it enables me to see the system as an actual system, not just a series of parts that are just loosely connected. And that gives me the perspective to help make the system healthier as I move through. And then just the relationships that I've built over the course of, over a period of time of working with folks, and them getting to know me and me getting to know them, and knowing that I'm trustworthy and I'm a grower of leaders. That support system has helped me get through any other difficulties.
Okay, back to Vice President Wagner.
What does an effective relationship between the board and superintendent look like, and how do you cultivate such a relationship?
Yeah, what a strong relationship between the board and the superintendent looks like. It looks like, as you watch a board meeting, it looks like you're watching a team of individuals working together, and you may not necessarily be able to pick out who the superintendent is at any given time because they're working, they're all rowing in the same direction. Doesn't mean that they're all in 100% agreement all the time, but they're all working in concert to set the best policies as possible for the students and the families of the district. It looks like a board member not hesitating to pick up the phone or jump on the email to ask a quick question of the superintendent, even though they might think it's a silly question or something they should already know. People underestimate the challenges that board members face, and there's a lot to know. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but there's a lot to know as a board member, and you all have more than full-time responsibilities outside of your role as a board. So it's really important that you have immediate and quick access to the superintendent and can get access to whatever information it is that you need for whatever reason. It looks like every board member receiving information from the superintendent in the manner that they find most expeditious. So that might be a weekly meeting with the superintendent. It might be a weekly phone call with the superintendent. It might be that the weekly memo that I would send out every weekend is enough for most board members. In other words, there aren't barriers in the relationship between individual board members and the superintendent, and that the board understands and follows its own policies.
Treasurer Donahue, please.
Please tell us about your experience with school finance and how you develop budgets that gain broad support.
My approach to budgeting is based in large part on making draft budgets that project what our situation will be a year out, 3 years out, and 5 years out. Obviously there are lots of unknowns. Until the legislature and the governor act, you don't know exactly what funding will look like the next year. We're never 100% sure what the economy is going to do. We never know exactly for sure what enrollment is going to do, et cetera, et cetera. But what I have found is when I go through that exercise, and I do it publicly with the board, it has been easier to make some adjustments to the budget that don't look like they're immediately necessary, but that will help us avoid something that's much more drastic 2 or 3 years down the road. I always try as much as possible to be in front of that, so that we don't have to do anything in any given year's budget that feels like the rug's being pulled out from underneath someone. So in 10 years as a superintendent, with 10 consecutive years of record low state funding, I didn't pink slip anyone. We had reductions in staff most of those years, but because we were anticipating a certain amount of those, we were able to absorb those with retirements and our other typical resignations. We never had to pull the plug on a major initiative that the board had committed to, because that was always a priority in how we put the budget together. So I think helping educate the community on how school budgets work, and that's something that I invested a lot of time in, even with legislators in Iowa who didn't really understand how school finance worked. We did a lot of work in teaching and helping our families know, there are different silos of funds, and we cannot use funds from silo A for any expenditures that fall under silo B, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's also always top of mind to determine what impact a change in the budget will have on local tax rates. My goal was always to keep the school district's contribution to the local tax rate flat. Over 10 years, we actually were able to drop it to decrease the school's contribution to the local property tax by just a few tenths of a percent. But no surprises is a mantra that I like to follow as much as possible. And you can really only do that, I think, if you're making realistic projections out into the future, so you can defend actions in any given year that may not look as pressing as they might if you compare it against what's likely to happen in the upcoming years. And the more accurate you are in doing that practice, the more faith the community has, and the easier it is for you to gain their support on an annual basis.
Secretary Torres, please.
How do you recruit, develop, and lead a management team? Give us an example of how you've done this in the past.
Yeah.
Mr. Ahart, 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. So I like to cast a pretty broad net when recruiting for management positions. As an example, about 5 years ago, I had the misfortune of an excellent CFO that actually started the same time I did as associate superintendent. He took ill and was hospitalized for almost 9 months, and then he was released from the hospital and ended up passing away about a month later in the middle of the year. And I knew he was going to be really tough to replace. I also knew that most sitting CFOs, at least in our state, had much of an appetite for coming to Des Moines because that was going to be the toughest job in the state for that role. So we cast a wide net and actually engaged with a search firm, and we did interview some sitting school district CFOs, but we also interviewed in the initial interviews 3 individuals from the private sector. And I ended up hiring a gentleman of Indian background. He was actually born in India and had relocated to the United States through a job, and that brought him to the Des Moines area. He had left that position for another job that he was not satisfied with. And it did require us to have a lot of very, I guess, non-traditional sort of interview conversations, because he had never worked for a public entity before. He had certainly never worked for a school before. And the role of CFO in a school district is a bit different in terms of the tasks that you have to perform on a regular basis with the board in public meetings and so forth. As it turns out, it was an excellent hire, and he was a great learner and helped broaden the diversity of our senior leadership team. And he brought a lot of insight into how we did business that we otherwise would not have had, because of his international experience and his role in a number of private companies before moving over to the public sector. But that's one specific example. What I always do is look for those folks whose heart is in the business of educating kids. Regardless of the role that you have, whether it's the superintendent, whether it's the food and nutrition director, the chief operations officer, the finance officer, what should be driving them every day is providing the best experiences possible for the students that we serve. That's the only reason we exist. And so success really needs to be measured in the impact, the positive impact that they're having on student outcomes. And building that culture can be extremely powerful. I had members of each of my teams, if they're not involved in instruction, spend a day in schools every year, just shadowing a student, to remind them of all the stuff that they're doing in accounts receivable, or all the stuff that they're doing in the skilled trades, plumbing or electrician or whatever. All of that is in the service of the experience these students have every day, and removing as many distractions from that setting as possible, allowing things to run as smoothly as possible, to allow principals to focus on instruction and not on administrivia. That whole philosophy needs to be baked in to whomever joins the leadership team, and then we need to intentionally build that as we progress through every year. So I always have instruction and what's happening with our students as the focal point for every cabinet meeting and every chiefs meeting. Because while the quality of the work that they're doing is hugely important, and I'm a big believer in making sure that we're efficient and competitive in each of our back office functions, it has to be absolutely top of mind every day that this is all done in the service of providing the best experience we can for our students. So I cast a broad net, and I try not to segregate based on past experience, but having the right skills and the right aptitude for working in a school system.
Okay, Trustee Joslin.
What unique skills or leverage could you bring to this position, and how will the Waterford School District be served by this?
I've proven myself to be effective, highly effective, and a positive change maker in every role that I've held as a public educator over the course of 30 some odd years. I've also had the really good fortune of being able to do some consulting with the Wallace Foundation and the Council for the Great City Schools that have gotten me into school districts, a number of school districts from around the country, to look at things that are working really, really well, and looking at some things that really need a lot of help to protect the students from poor outcomes. So I think my exposure to practices nationally is something that not everybody can bring to this role, and is always helpful, I think, when you're looking at any given system, Waterford included. Here's where we are right now. How do we take that next step forward? Because I'm a big believer in continuous improvement, and just because we're doing really well, if we're not demonstrating by the end of next year that we're better, then we're not doing the job very well. So I'm a big believer in continuous improvement and not resting on our laurels. Another advantage I think that I have that is unique to most superintendents anyway is I earned my master's in public administration prior to becoming a superintendent, with the thought that I would be leaving education when I left the classroom. There's a whole long story behind that, but that we don't have time for. But I think that perspective, especially when it comes to the business and finance and the human resources, talent management, and the operations aspects of a school district, are something that I'm much more comfortable with and conversant in than most superintendents that you'll find. I enjoy that work. I'm an instructional person first, but it's really important that I understand all aspects of the district so I can give critical feedback and I can help inform plans for improvement. And then finally, I guess I would say that I served as a superintendent for 10 years under some extremely trying conditions. I served, we had a school board of 7 members. Even though I was superintendent for just 10 years, I served with 20 different board members. It seemed like I couldn't go more than 6 months without a change on the board, which is its own challenge. And we had a political circumstance in our state that is somewhat anti-public education. And so our new money year over year was at record lows for 10 consecutive years. Despite that, we ended my tenure with a solvency rate of over 15%. We had a surplus in unspent spending authority, which is a weird Iowa school finance thing. It's really important, but it would take me a little while to explain it to you. And a net decrease in our contribution to the local sales tax. I don't think our communities can have faith that we're doing a good job with their students if we can't run the business part of the school district in an effective and efficient manner. So I think how we do our non-instructional job reflects directly on the community's perception of how effective we are as a system. And I think it should. So I think I bring some acumen there that is unusual to find.
Thank you so much. We're coming up on the end of our time here, so I want to ask you one last question to conclude our chat here this evening. Again, we appreciate very much your interest in potentially serving as our next superintendent. And we'd love to know if there's anything additional that you'd like to share with us that we haven't talked about this evening.
Well, I would like to ask a question. So from all appearances, Waterford is doing swimmingly in all respects. What would the board say are the top 1 or 2 challenges as you move into the next couple of years?
Yeah, Pat, go ahead.
I mean, I'm just throwing out ideas is obviously decreasing enrollment or test scores and what else do you guys think?
Following our strategic plan, recruiting and maintaining our staff and our students.
So
Achievement.
we're still looking at improving our achievement scores and then recruiting and retaining staff. And what was the other? And recruiting and saving our students. And we've got some decreasing enrollment issues that we're looking to stifle and put a stop to and bring back our families that are leaving due to school of choice to other local districts.
Okay.
And interesting piece of context is we've made significant investments in our curriculum over the last 4 or 5 years, $3.6 million. And so that has been a big systems change at every level of our district. As our colleagues have already suggested, the budget picture in the context of declining enrollment, an unclear budget picture from the state, we have, there seems to be a sort of push towards one-time dollars, or at least that has seemed to have been the case this last couple of years. So yeah, I think that's it. Anything else, colleagues? So I think those are the things we're talking and thinking a lot about here in Waterford at the moment.
Okay, that's unfortunately that's a pretty common story. Yeah, there are no shortage of challenges in public education, but I do think that there's real opportunity to demonstrate that it can be done well, despite these ever-growing forces that seem to be pressing up against us.
Excellent. Was there anything else?
And again, I want to thank you all for the privilege of your time and allowing me to meet with you virtually. It was a huge gift.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate your interest in this position and for having a great conversation with us this evening. As you know, we've been interviewing for the position, and if you are selected as a finalist for another round of interviews, we will be sure to let you know as soon as possible.
Great.
But we really appreciate you being here with us virtually this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Pleasure.